On a scale from 0 to 10, how happy are you? More and more organizations today are putting the same question in front of their employees. Quarterly, monthly, weekly, and sometimes even daily, organizations are looking for ways to measure happiness. They're using it as leading indicator for many things, including team performance, employee turnover, and ultimately organizational culture. What's driving this interest? Let's play a little game to find out. Question number 1. 137 senior executives were interviewed by Gartner in Q4 2018 for the Emerging Risk Survey. 67% of them identified this as the highest emerging risk for organizations worldwide. And the answer is, what is talent shortage? The concerns about talent shortages are now stronger than the ones about accelerating privacy regulations and cloud computing, which were the top two in Q3. Okay, let's get going. Question number 2. According to Career Builder research, this percent of US organizations can't fill their open positions in 12 weeks or more. And the answer is, what is 60%? 60% of US organizations can't fill their open positions for 12 weeks or more. And you thought you were the only one struggling, right? The talent shortage is real. Combined with the high employee turnover, it leads to massive loss of profit opportunities for organizations. One way this organization can reduce the damage is by focusing on retaining and upskilling their current employees. Measuring happiness or team health is just the first step in that direction. Experimenting with new ways of giving up command and control, giving people autonomy to pick their own teams, helping people gain new skills without them having to leave their current employer, that's what can truly transform the culture of organization. Transform it into a culture that attracts people, keeps them motivated and well-gelled with their teams, a culture that enables resilience, innovation, and high performance. My name is Dana Pulaeva. I'm an Agile coach and founder of Agile Blake Consulting in New York. And my first time exposure to self-selection process was through a book written by Sandy Mamoli and David Moll. The book had detailed steps that helped me better envision the self-selection process, as well as inspiring stories that highlighted the benefits of the new way of building teams. I was excited. I wanted to give it a try, but the organization I was working with at that time was not ready. Fast forward a couple of years, and now I am at the Business Agility Conference in New York. I hear about self-selection again. Amber King is sharing her story of running a self-selection with distributed teams in an organization recently affected by a round of layoffs. And that was exactly the situation I was in at that time. A large retail company I was part of just went through a workforce reduction. Morale was very low, and the management was looking for ways to rebuild the teams and create a new culture. They were ready to try something radically different from what was used there in the past. And that's how my self-selection journey started. We've learned so much through that first-time experiment. With our own eyes, we've seen how empowering people to choose their own teams and letting them pursue their learning interest could be a liberating experience for them and a great vehicle for building a better culture for organizations. And not only that, the teams that performed through self-selection were getting the work done better for their customers, moving away from the hero culture, eliminating buzz factor problem, and becoming high-performing much faster. In this session, I will share with you my own stories of preparing technology teams and management for their first self-selection event, running it with organizations in New York, Dublin, and Chicago, and starting up new teams post the self-selection events. You will learn about the benefits this organization experienced from the self-selection, the surprises we ran into when getting ready for it, and modifications I made after the first time to bring in more empathy and fun into this process. So what is the self-selection? It is a facilitated process during which members are given autonomy to select a purpose, business problem that needs solving, people to work with on solving the problem, and an opportunity to pursue their learning interest and develop mastery. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I'm sure you're recognizing this combination. That's right. Daniel Pink, in his highly acclaimed book Drive, identified these as the 3 elements of intrinsic motivation, the most effective one for knowledge workers. By supporting your self-selection, senior management sends a very powerful message to their people. We trust you. We trust you to make the right decision, and we have your back. When people see that they're being treated as adults, they're trusted with making decisions and experimenting, suddenly things begin to shift. People start taking more risk. They start developing this important quality, psychological safety, which is a shared belief that this place is safe for interpersonal risk-taking, and it's okay to experiment. It's okay to take risk. It's good to have a different opinion and be yourself, without a fear of negative consequences to self-image, status, or career. I'm sure you heard about Google Project Aristotle. So Google found in their study of hundreds of teams and shared in this famous report that psychological safety was the first and the most important element enabling the team's high performance. Other key factors were dependability, clarity, meaningful work, and ability to make an impact. And all these are exactly the factors that come together through self-selection. Not surprisingly, those organizations that experiment with self-selection notice improvement in their talent retention, employee happiness, and their overall organizational resilience. My experience with self-selection has been with the two types of organization. First one I already mentioned, organizations looking to recover after major layoffs, rebuilding teams, and beginning rebuilding the culture. Second one is much more positive. These are fast-growing companies looking to rebuild their teams in a different way for supporting new products, retaining talented team members, and enabling organizational learning. The goal of self-selection in both cases was to prepare organization and hold a space where the group of roughly 50 people can come together and self-select into 5 to 7 new teams in less than 4 hours. By now you should be wondering, what kind of magic happens in those 4 hours? I invite you to imagine yourself as one of the participants and walk with me through the self-selection event. Imagine for a second this large, bright room with lots of colorful posters around you. As you walk into the room, you notice that there is a bunch of cards on the first table. These cards were prepared by facilitator after talking to you, having interviews with the participants, and they were prepared ahead of time. Each card has a photo, a name, as well as a list of skills and learning interests or team ingredients. You pick up your card and you settle in one of the chairs. A facilitator welcomes everyone, reminds about the rules of the event, and invites the product owner and the tech leads to start their pitches. Each pair takes turns to deliver a short and concise, no more than 10 minutes, product pitch. This is where they're getting everyone excited about the initiative. They're really selling the initiative. They want to bring more people on board. Product owner talks about the vision for the product, why this product is important, who are the main customers, and how success will be measured on this initiative, as well as sharing the short and long-term roadmap for this product. Tech lead talks about technology, about type of development needed, the amount of maintenance that's there, as well as the quality of the current code base. They also talk about the ideal team culture that they're hoping that the team will build. People get really creative with their pitches, so you hear lots of laughter in the room, there's a lot of excitement. Facilitator reminds you to think about the choices. So you look at your card and you see that there are 3 empty spaces on it. There for you to write in your choices in the ranked order. You listen, you ask questions, you think, and you write down your first, second, and third choice of the project. You turn around and you see that there are different posters with the rule on the walls. These rules are exactly the same that facilitator mentioned at the beginning. And the rules are very simple. Teams have to be capable of delivering end-to-end, seek new teams to learn and grow, and the most important one, do what's best for the company. These rules I remember for you to remember as you're walking through the self-selection. And a reminder for you that you have a choice and you can take your choice as well, while keeping in mind the company interest. The rules are also encouraging you to think about learning opportunities available to you now and the way how you can develop your skills in the future. You feel very excited and a bit anxious. What will happen next? After the product pitches have been completed, facilitator announces a break. thanks the management and the spectators, and asks that only participants return after the break. A word about spectators. First-time self-selection is always a highly anticipated event. Everyone wants to be there. Sandy Mamolo in her book advises to limit participations to only those who are actually doing the self-selection, since having spectators, especially managers, during the self-selection can interfere with the dynamic of the event. When I was running my first self-selection, the interest was so high, I had to negotiate and compromise. So we split the event into two parts. The first part of the event, with the rules and pitches, was open to anyone. And we had so many people showing up. Everyone was curious about what's going on. Everyone was interested to learn more about different projects that are happening in organizations. So everyone benefited from that information. After the break, only people with participants' card were invited to come back into the room and continue with the actual team selection. Okay, back to our story. You come back from the break, and now the room is full of excitement and people are starting getting ready. This is where the action begins. At facilitator signal, you get up from your chair, walk to the poster of the team that you marked as your first choice, and add your card to the team's blueprint. You talk to people who picked the same team, check for the skills listed on the blueprint and the one listed on each participant's card, and note any discrepancy. You also notice that some people put their cards on something that's called I Can Help in Any Team poster. And that's okay, because these are the people that don't have any preferences at the moment. We'll come back to that later in the second round. They're just willing to join any team. Next comes the blueprint check. Going around the room, facilitator asks every team the following 3 questions. Is your team complete? Does your team have all the needed skills? And do we need another round to rebalance? After the first round of self-selection, it is natural to have an overpopulation in some teams and lack of members in the others. Time for the second round. Facilitator asks people in the overpopulated teams, would you be willing to consider your second choice? As you ended up being in one of those overpopulated teams, you look again at your participant card, and guess what happens? One of the underpopulated teams comes to you and invites you to join them. You look at your card again, and hey, after all, this team is your second choice. You talk to people on that team and decide to give the new team a chance. It's okay to experiment. You're not committing to stay on this team for the rest of your life. If that doesn't work out, you can always change back after some time. Remaining spots are filled by people who didn't mind to be a part of any team. After the second blueprint check, most of the teams have been formed. But hey, what's happening? Some teams still have empty spots on the blueprint. What are we going to do about that? So what happens is that it's a good feedback that there might be less interest in those specific initiatives, and instead of forcing people to join the initiatives that they're not interested in, these empty spots turn into open positions, and the teams later get involved in hiring process, helping to select new team members who would be happy to join these teams. Self-selection ends with a small retrospective, reflecting on the experience, learning what can be improved for the next time, and celebrating the brave experiment the organization just went through. While the self-selection event ends here, the new teams don't start working on the new way the next day. Typical steps that follow are creating transition plan, running team liftoff events to define the new team norms, purpose, and context, as well as coaching the teams to help them go faster through forming, storming, norming, performing stages of team formation. Back to the team blueprint. This is how one may look like. It has a product name or team name. It has a list of available open spots for the team members, list of skills or team ingredients required for this team to be successful, cross-functional, and able to deliver end-to-end. It may also have names of pre-selected team members. And now that's interesting, because ideally everyone on the team will be self-selecting at the event. But unfortunately, it's not always possible. Your organization may have small numbers of highly specialized team members and a limited budget for new hires. So do what's right for your company. The blueprint is one of the ground rules that gets to be defined upfront during self-selection preparation time with management and the tech leads. The good news is that the team blueprint is process agnostic. You can define new teams as the pure Scrum teams and have product owner, Scrum Master, and everybody else being development team members. Or you can have a hybrid team with separate roles for front-end versus back-end developer, QA, business analyst, and so on and so forth. Self-selection can work with any team structure, as long as the end product of self-selection are the new, autonomous, and cross-functional team. Over time, you do want to encourage people to think about cross-functional teams and cross-functional skills, and also growing their T-shaped skills. So if you haven't heard the term T-shaped skills, I'm going to demo it for you. So if you have a specialty in one area, that specialty is very deep, but your skills are I-shaped, just like the letter I. If you start growing additional complementary skills, you become T-shaped. And so I'm going to demonstrate this little letter T. But you're growing those complementary skills, and it's important because then you can help out on your team in those areas where it's needed. You're not limited to only one type of skill or one type of thing that you can bring to your team. If you're running your first self-selection event, preparing for it can take anywhere from 1 to 3 months. If you can, try to make preparation time shorter so that the organization doesn't lose momentum. There are 5 key elements that need to be ready before the group can move forward with the event. First one, a facilitator. If you're the one entrusted with this role, learn as much as you can about self-selection. Connect with others who's done it before. Pull in extra help if you need it. When I was working with my first self-selection, I connected with Amber King, whose presentation I attended at the Business Agility Conference. Having her join my call with the senior leadership was extremely helpful in giving them confidence that this process could work for them too. This leads us to the second element, the management. You need their buy-in, but even more importantly, you need their active support. One way to get there is by helping them solve a real issue. One of the organizations I've worked with had a new engineering director. We'll call him Bob. Bob has been tasked with reorganizing engineering teams after a major layoff. The challenge was that Bob didn't know many people in his new organization. Fortunately, Bob had an agile mindset and cared about people. Instead of trying to pull them together at random, Bob agreed to experiment with letting them choose teams for themselves through self-selection. Solving real issue and position it as an experiment is a good strategy for getting the initial management buy-in. They will still have a number of questions and what-ifs for you. Work with them to fine-tune the process and define together the ground rules for successful self-selection. How large will be the first self-selection? Who will participate in it? If you have contractors and full-time employees, do your best to negotiate equal opportunity participation for all, because that will affect your team dynamic. Do you have any highly specialized team members that will have to be shared between multiple teams? Is there an opportunity to fill the gaps on unpopular teams with the open positions? Be ready to answer all these questions before you start preparing the participants. You will need to be very transparent about upcoming process. Use multiple channels to communicate. Set up Slack channel, Confluence page, Google Drive, whatever is available in your organization for information sharing. Run Q&A sessions. Be prepared to explain this again, and again. Help people learn about the change that's coming their way and why that change is a good thing. In my first self-selection event, when I hosted the very first Q&A session, no one asked a single question in the session. However, they found ways to bump into me in the corridor, in the restroom, in the elevator, and ask those questions in the one-on-one setting. I definitely mastered my elevator speech at that time. Last but not least, you need to prepare the room. And for this kind of event, you need a large room with some theater-style seating up front, plenty of wall space for the team blueprints and the role posters, as well as an ample space for the large group to walk around the room while selecting the teams. Try booking the room away from the typical team working areas. Do it as an offsite if you can. Help participants to focus on the self-selection event. Make sure to bring some snacks, and if you can, plan to finish the event with a small celebration. When I ran this process for the first time, there was just one big thing that took me by surprise. As positive as it might sound to majority of people, self-selection brings change. And like any other change, it may cause a discomfort and even resistance. What surprised me the most in my first time experience was the amount of spoken and unspoken fear in participants and management alike. The very first one goes back to our school years and taps into our gym memories. standing in line, waiting to be picked, and not being selected. Scary, right? The other one is fear of losing team identity, especially if the teams were working together for so long. Fear of missing out. What if I selected this team and then realize I actually want to be part of the other one instead? What do I do? Fear of unknown for participants and management alike. And the one very relevant to the middle management, fear of losing control. These fears are very real. Don't try to invalidate them. Instead, listen to the concerns, work with the group to help them learn more and become more comfortable with the process. Faced with this reaction from the group, I had to rethink my approach and come back with a different solution, a gamified simulation paired with the new Spooky Questions game, solution that introduced empathy and fun into this process. Now, instead of being passive listeners during the Q&A sessions, people turn into active participants, running simulation, debriefing, playing Spooky Questions game, and building their first self-selection muscle memory through the simulation. Speaking of the simulation, now I will ask you again to use your imagination. Imagine yourself in the room full of people who are asked to simulate the following scenario. You all work for a young, fast-growing company in the virtual travel space. For our new product lines, we need to learn everything about local culture in 5 different locations. 5 of you will become product owners and pitch those locations to others, who will be new team members, self-selecting into the new travel teams. Everyone in the room, yourself included, will prepare their own participant card, thinking about current skills, learning interests, and the learning preferences. And here's how a sample participant card will look like. For every skill listed on the card, participant will indicate whether this is a skill they want to learn, whether it's something that they're comfortable doing, something that they can teach someone how to do, or something that they absolutely would not want to do ever. And as they start the simulation, the team members listen to the product owner pitches, mark their choices, place the cards on specific city poster, and go through blueprint check and negotiation, just like in real self-selection, except there is no limit on imaginary perks that you can negotiate while doing this simulation. Fun fact, every time I run the simulation with teams or at various conferences, there is one city that always gets the largest number of volunteers. And that city is Kyoto. It always wins, hands down. Once everyone got to experience the simulation, we debrief and draw parallels with the real-life products. What product is our Kyoto? How would we handle the overpopulation on that product? What can we change to make it better? What negotiation tactics can we use in the real-life self-selection? Then we run a gamified Q&A with the Spooky Questions game. Spooky Questions game, this is where participants use a set of pre-prepared questions and answers to go deep into process as team and answer their own questions. The format makes Q&A session more engaging and fun. It's like playing apples to apples with the team. The biggest insight comes from the Joker card, blank cards on which participants are asked to write in their own questions. First, they practice answering these questions as a group, building more confidence about the process. And second, these cards serve as a feedback loop for you as a facilitator, exposing in a safe way the fears, worries, and anxiety that the team may have, and making sure that the group is ready for self-selection. As facilitator, you get the most value out of reviewing these Joker cards and making sure these concerns are addressed before running the actual self-selection event. And here are some examples of typical fears and worries from the real team. What if I'm not selected? What if I don't find any team that wants me? And as an extension, if I'm not selected, what if I lose my job? What if skills that I have or the skills of others in my team are not good enough? And many, many, many other questions. These fears are very real. Don't try to invalidate them. Instead, work with each group, understand what's driving those fears. Ensure that senior manager has people's back. Help people learn more, become more confident about the process and more comfortable with the process, and help them see the opportunities. I want to leave you with a few stories about the impact a self-selection had for real people and real organization. I met the senior developer who was held back by his functional manager because this developer was just too valuable to leave the team. In a self-selection event, developers selected into a new team. Not in the first round, he was too afraid, but in the second round, when he was prompted with, would you consider your second choice? And because of that, he got a chance to start working on machine learning, something he was really excited about. Guess what happened to people in his old team that were considered to be too junior? They got an opportunity to step up and develop their skills. A fast-growing technology company continued running a self-selection event on a regular basis. To make the team transitions easy, they established department-wide definition of done, they improved their code quality, knowledge sharing, and they streamlined the team onboarding process. Developers in the large organization came out of self-selection with awareness of all the different initiatives that the organization was working on. Never before they had that type of visibility. Empowered by selecting new opportunities for themselves, they built new connections across teams and continued collaboration beyond the self-selection event. If you're watching this and thinking, nope, my organization just is not ready to give employees this kind of freedom, consider this quote by Laszlo Bock, Google's head of people operations. The most talented people on the planet are increasingly physically mobile, increasingly connected through technology, and importantly, increasingly discoverable by employers. These global talent want to be in a high-freedom company, and talent will flow to those companies. If you work in a low-freedom command and control environment today, even the thought of experimenting in self-selection could be frightening. Imagine the joy of getting the best people to come to your organization, creating environment for your team to be driven by mission, and be inspired to come to work every day. Priceless. In this session, I've introduced you to simple and actionable steps you can take to experiment with self-selection in your organization. There is so much more you can learn from these great resources. Sandy Mamoli and David Moll's book will give you a very detailed guide to self-selection. This is the book I started from. You can find my self-selection book on LeanPub and get access to spooky questions and this simulation. Heidi Helfand's book on dynamic reteaming will show you what's next after self-selection and talk about different case studies, different patterns of teaming and reteaming. And finally, The Tribal Unity by M. Campbell Pretty will give you insights into expanding the team culture and team unity beyond a single team into a high-performing organization. With that, I encourage you to take the first step and give a self-selection a try in your organization. And when you do, let me know how it went. Write a blog post, share it on Twitter, inspire others with your story. Thank you very much.